Hello, and welcome to my video for the Android application demonstration. So to start out here is just a summary of what my proposal was. I wanted to create an Android application that would return a list of stocks with the highest volatility based off of the opening and closing price from the day before. From there, the data would be logged into an internal database, and users would have the ability to browse the history of a stock's volatility. Uh, the plan was to pull all of the stock market data from an external resource. So there were some changes from my proposal that I ended up having to make just to make getting this application done more realistic. And in some ways I actually feel improved. So the final application actually uses today's opening price and the current price of the stock to return a list of the top positive volatile stocks for the day. So it's no longer using data from the day before, it's using current data, so users are able to see what a stock's current volatility is for that point during the day. I have yet to get to the internal database for tracking the volatility of stocks over time. I wasn't able to get that implemented yet. But with the API that I ended up utilizing, that I'll cover further in the presentation, actually has a feature built into it that allows you to pull the history of a stock's data very easily. So to get started, we're going to go through a demonstration of the app, and I'm going to have that running alongside while I go through this presentation. My application at the moment currently takes a long time to perform its main functionality, which I will discuss in the presentation. So I'm going to have that get that started now, and then going along through the presentation, we'll be able to see what happens in the application. So pulling up Android Studio is what the IDE that I use to develop this. I'm just going to get it running. I'm running it on a Pixel 2 device, the API 29. All right, we've got that running. So now I will pull that up here. Here is the Pixel 2 device. So when the device first loads up, you can see, get that centered for now. We can see it's only one screen. The title is the name of the application is VolTrack. Title, it is a volatility tracker, and then it just informs the user that below are the 10 most volatile stocks for the day that are positive. So the only two options that the user have on this application is to click this little mail icon here, which just informs them how they can get in touch with me, and then this load and refresh list. So I'm going to go ahead and click the load and refresh list, and that's going to perform the main functionality for the application. And I'm going to go through the rest of the presentation now and discuss some of the code that's going on while the app is performing the main thing. On my machine, it takes about 6 minutes currently to run. So let's get started. So how am I actually getting the stock market data? I found a really useful API for doing this. I found it on financequotes-api.com. This pulls the market data from Yahoo Finance. Not affiliated with Yahoo Finance, but that's how all of the functionality of this API is, just pulling different data points from Yahoo Finance. This was really beneficial to my application, especially Android development, because it is a Java-based API, and it had really good documentation for explaining all of the different methods and features of this API. So I ended up using this as my external resource for gathering stock market data. How I actually implement this into the project is using the Gradle scripts section of Android Studio. Going in, there is two different build.gradle scripts that you can see in the menu right here, and then the one that is a module app. I was actually able to just get this line right here, line 24. Line 24 imports the API into my project for me and allows to utilize its features. So within the code itself, I had to add a few additional imports to the main activity.java to utilize the full functionality of the API. That can be seen in lines 19 through 21 right here. Just import So import java.math.bigdecimal actually isn't a part of the API, but it is something I also had to implement to be able to get it to run properly, because a lot of the data that is pulled from the API is in big decimal format. And then the following two lines, 20 and 21, are both import Yahoo Finance based, which is the name of the API. So when we start the application, here is the onCreate method in my main activity.java, which is the block of code that is executed when you first boot up an application. So I actually didn't have to make any changes really from the default block of code that it gives you when you start up a new Android project. The only thing I had to add is in lines 33 through 35. One of the issues that I encountered was a network on main thread exception. Was something that was preventing me from using the API to reach the Yahoo Finance website. And as you can see in the comment I made, this is actually just a temporary fix for it. Ideally, what I did to fix this isn't what you would want to do. The network on main thread exception, from my understanding, is when you're trying to use the main thread of the application to connect to other networks to retrieve data. From what I read online, ideally you want to do this through something called, I think it was asynchronous threads, that allows you to not run into any potential issues. But for my application, what I was doing, and since I don't plan on releasing this yet to end users, I just used this temporary fix to get around that, which can be seen in lines 33 through 35. I also had to add additional statements into the Android manifest.xml file. There was two additional permissions that I had to add into this file right here. They both just allow my application, the main thread, to do the network connectivity. All right. So as we can see, here is our application on first startup. This is after this. When this starts up, this is the block of code that was executed, and this is the image that the user is able to see. So now the main functionality for my application is actually stored in the refresh method in the main activity.java file. So when the load/refresh list button is clicked, the refresh method gets called from the code. So this method actually has three key parts to it that I'm going to break down. The first part is actually adding the stocks from Yahoo Finance to an array. The second part is looping through that array to find the top 10 volatile stocks, and then the final part is posting the top 10 volatile stocks to the device for the user to actually see. So let's look at part one. So part one, I create an array of the stock object that comes from the Yahoo Finance API, and I basically, what we can see from looking at the code in, say, line 74, Yahoo Finance.get, that .get, and then in parentheses AA. What this is doing, it's pulling from Yahoo Finance the data for the stock ticker AA. And then what I'm doing is I have a long list from line 73 to 591 is all of the stock data that I'm putting into this array. Currently, my application only does stocks that start with A, and the reason why is going to be discussed later in the issues. So this is the first part of the refresh method. It has to actually get all of the data from Yahoo Finance. Part two is, as we can see, I'll take a brief second to look at this. Over on the application, we can see now that a few minutes have passed. The 10 most volatile stocks for the day that are positive have been returned to us. So as we can see here, it's a simple list, but this is the core functionality right here, is just letting the user know what the most volatile stocks are. So back to the presentation. All right, so part two of the refresh method is actually figuring out what the most volatile stocks are from that data in the array. So I use 10 sets of two variables to keep track of the volatile stocks. If we look here say at 594 and 595, we can see that I have a double variable named greatest, and this is used to hold the percentage change, and then below that is a string variable, and that is used to hold the stock ticker. And then I've done this total of 10 times to represent the list of 10 different volatile stocks. So part 2 continued now is actually how we're figuring out what the most volatile are. So I used 10 for loops that each have a similar structure that each one goes through the array of stocks to find the 10 most volatile. So this is found in lines 624 through 713. I've got a small excerpt here that shows 2 of the for loops, and I'll walk through that here to explain what it's actually doing. So in this first for loop, this is for finding the greatest volatile stock. What it's doing, it's looping through the entire array of stocks, and each stock gets looked at in an if statement, and this is using some of the functionality of the API. If we look right here, stock array I, get quote, get change in percent. This uses the API, the Yahoo Finance API, and returns a big decimal value to me of the percentage change that stock has received throughout the day. And then from there, I'm converting that big decimal value to a double value, and then I'm comparing it to the current greatest volatile stock. If it's greater than that, it goes in here, and then it assigns to greatest. It essentially assigns that stock so that it's the new greatest volatile stock by assigning the percentage change and the stock ticker to that pair of 2 variables. And then if we look here, for loops 2 through 10, they are a little bit different because they come after the most volatile stock. The main change that we see is that in the if statement, now we are comparing the stock change in percent. We are changing that. We are looking to see if it is less than the value from before, so in this case greatest. And we're also checking to see if it is greater than the current second most volatile value. And if it satisfies that, that stock becomes the new second greatest volatile. So take a look at the rest of the code here. The rest of the loops they all follow a similar structure to the second one here. They all follow this checking to see if it is less than the previous greatest, and then greater than the current volatile stock. So for the rest of the loops, they all follow that similar structure. So now if we look at part 3 is how we actually display the results to the user. This is just using nothing crazy to do this. This is just assigning it's just looking for the labels on the user interface, and then once it's been found, it's setting the text of those labels, or text views as Android calls them. It's then setting the text value to, say, the symbol of the stock. It shows the stock ticker, and then it says change, and then shows the change in percentage. And then it does this for all of the whole entire list, the whole top 10 list of volatile stocks. And then in this image here, we can see the final results. It should be, since the market is closed for the day, these should be identical now, and I believe they are. And that shows the gist of the application. That's a user is able to easily take some time, but easily they're able to see a quick list of what the most volatile stocks for the day are. So now some issues I want to address that I had with this. So the only real issue, I guess programming wise, that prevented me from moving forward was the network on main thread exception. That was the only big hurdle I had to get around to actually get the application up and running. Once I solved that, I really didn't have any issues error-wise, but there are some issues that I experienced that I still need to work on before I try and get this pushed to end users. So the first one is there is a very large number of stocks. There's too many to input by hand. I underestimated how many stocks there actually were. I went on the New York Stock Exchange website to get this data, and there was a total of 700 pages of different stock ticker information, and I got to about page 60, and then that's when I kind of realized that this isn't realistic for someone to do by hand. I'll have to find a different way around it. Another issue that I had was that pulling a large amount of stock data takes a very long time. I mean, just to pull all the stock data for the stocks that start with A took about 6 to 7 minutes. So I mean, if we multiply that by 20, assuming similar runtime, we multiply that by 26. I mean, that is just an extremely unrealistic expectation for end users to have to sit through just to get this information. And kind of related to that is this next issue that I have is at the moment I have an inefficient means of getting the most volatile list of stocks. Currently I'm using the 10 for loops to determine which ones are the most volatile. And then a final issue that I had, unrelated to Android development in general in my application, I was following along with a tutorial I found on Tutorials Point to get a little bit of help that I needed, and after leaving that website up for a little bit, it actually infected my PC with malware, and now I regularly, probably every few minutes, have been getting pop-ups saying that my PC has been infected, but it says the source of this notification is coming from tutorialspoint.com, so unrelated, but that is definitely an issue I had while doing this project, so I thought I'd throw that in there just for fun. So some solutions to the issues I just presented. So with the network on main thread exception, I showed that workaround that I had. Before pushing this to end users, I'm definitely going to have to properly implement the right way to do it. Right now I'm just using a bypass that essentially lets me get around this exception, but I'm still running the risk of errors showing up in my program. There's using asynchronous task will allow me to properly solve that exception. In terms of how I plan on getting all of the stocks actually implemented, I'm looking towards finding some automated way of adding all the stocks to the application. I've had some ideas, but nothing that really became concrete to me before finishing up this application, but I'm definitely going to have to find an automated way of adding the several thousands worth of stocks into my application. It's doable by hand, but it seems like a very tedious task that could be automated. And then another issue that I kind of have a solution for that I think would probably work, that has to do with how all of the data is actually being pulled from Yahoo Finance. I think probably a good way to get around this would be to try and utilize some kind of cloud solution that handles all the requests for me, so it's not instead of the user's device making all of the requests to Yahoo Finance, it's my servers on the back end making all the requests, getting all of that data, and then presenting it in a lot quicker fashion to the end user, because they don't have to make the request, my servers are doing it. And then to solve my inefficient means of actually getting the list of most volatile stocks, I think the best way of doing this is going to be to actually sort the stocks array based off of the decimal change value, and then I should be able to just have to loop through that once as opposed to having to loop through it 10 times. So going forward, I definitely want to continue working on this application. I actually really enjoy creating it. It reminds me a lot of, I guess, back in my early days of programming, creating like C# and Visual Basic applications, just because of the way of how the mobile development is done, which is something I actually really enjoyed. So I definitely want to keep working on this and explore Android development further. And some functionality I'm hoping to get implemented into this would be the ability to track negative volatility. This is something that's actually really easy to do. This is just going to be a matter of flipping the signs of the in this section here, part 2, it's just going to be a matter of switching these really to get the negative volatile stocks. So that's something I'm hoping to get here implemented here soon, which I'll be exciting to see. Had considered implementing for this, but just from the time that it was taking for the application to run, just getting the positive volatility, I didn't think I should add that as well because the app would be running for nearly 12 minutes just to get that. I would also like to give users the ability to track specific stocks because right now I actually have no idea what any of these stocks are. So I think because there's thousands of stocks, and I feel like a lot of people are trying to track specific stocks. So that's definitely a feature. If I want users to actually become active daily users of this, I'm going to have to add that type of feature. Something also that I think would be really cool to do would be to add filter options so that users could say like browse by industry. Maybe they only want to see the volatility for stocks that are in the tech industry, oil industry, materials industry, stuff like that. I think that would be something that could be really interesting to see. The ability to see the stocks within that industry and then also get an average of the volatility for that industry. That's going to take a little bit more effort because I'm not sure if there's like if stocks are actually tagged with a specific category. So that's something I'm going to have to look at. And then something that's also should be pretty easy to implement is I want users to be able to actually click on a stock. For example, right here, if a user wanted to learn more information about the stock AKTX, they would be able to click on this label right here, and then it'll open up the Yahoo Finance page for them, allowing them to get more information on it. That's from my understanding of Android. That's actually pretty easy to implement, so I'm hoping to get that done soon as well. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this project. I learned a lot, and I'm excited to be able to keep working on the application that I've made. But since I only used screenshots in my presentation, here's kind of just a scroll through a highlight of the different bits of code just to show that they're actually in a file and I didn't just, I don't know, make up that presentation. So here is the onCreate block of code, exact same snippet from the screenshot. We can see the temp fix that I have for the network on main thread exception. And then scrolling down, these I didn't cover. These were just default blocks of code that came with my Android project when I started it up. And then here is the main heart of the code, the refresh method that gets executed when that button is clicked. So we can see part 1, which is filling the array with stock data. We can see that right here. All roughly 500 stocks that I typed in by hand. Right here, that's part 1. And then we can see the start of part 2 here, which is all of the variables that I declared for keeping track of the volatile stocks. And then right here is all of the 10 loops that I showed in part 2 that actually loops through the array and figures out which stock where does it fall in that top 10 list of most volatile. Then scrolling down through there, we reach part 3 of the refresh method that I showed in the presentation, which is just sets the user interface so the user can actually see what the list of most volatile were. And then we've got a catch statement. The entirety of the refresh method is wrapped in a try-catch block. This was actually required, or I kept getting an IO exception, or it said I was getting an IO exception, so I wrapped everything in a try-catch block, and it just tells me what the error is if I get an error, which following this workaround of the network on main thread exception, once I implemented that fix, I didn't have any errors or issues with the rest of my project. But yep, that is it for my demonstration of my Android application. Thank you.